I am so excited to have the fabulous Nadia Shah in my home, on my channel. Welcome to my show.
I love you. Thank you. And can I just say, if I were to envision a home of someone as fabulous, as amazing, and inspiring as I know that you are, this is the home I would envision. This is amazing. Who has a gold couch? You have a gold couch. You are the type of person who has earned and deserved and gets to live on a gold couch.
Oh my gosh,
I feel like so proud of you.
Aww.
I really do. Like, I just see you glowing and shining and giving your light, and you know that I just adore you so much.
Oh my gosh, and it is absolutely ditto. I'm so happy that you're here. There's so much I want to talk to you about. I'm thinking, how do I get it all encapsulated in a 1 hour segment? But we're going to sure try.
You ask me anything.
Okay.
For you, of course.
So let's start right at the beginning.
Okay.
Talk to me about, like, what was it like in the early days and like the first, like, say, 10 years of your life? Go back to maybe some moments at that time that you remember, and tell me why you remember them.
There are a few moments that come to mind. One thing I know is, my parents, I feel like I was raised by feminists. They were very much about equality, especially because of, coming from South Asia. They cared a lot about equality for women. And I was born and raised in Canada. And one of my earliest memories is of my parents telling me that I was going to be Prime Minister of Canada one day. And really, this was a sincere goal that they had for me. And,
Don't you love Indian parents?
I love it. I love it. My parents are from Pakistan, and my family's been here for like 60 years now. And we feel very connected to the whole, South Asian experience. But yeah, I remember that very clearly. And I remember at like 5 and 6 years old, telling my father, talking to my father, articulating to him why women are equal, and why equality matters, and why it doesn't matter what race you are. Like these were things that were a part of sort of the zeitgeist of my home. And, my spirit had plans of its own. I remember at a really young age as well, like I think I must have been about 10 or 11, where I said to myself, I don't want to be Prime Minister because then I can't wear what I really want to wear, right? That was my thinking. But yeah, like that sort of carried me forward. And when I went to university, I started out at university studying social justice. And then about halfway through, I realized that there's something else going on, like there's something deeper, and I wanted to explore that. And so I changed my major to philosophy, and then that led me to do my master's in, it's a specialized type of religious studies. It was cosmology and divination, which was looking at astrology from all types of perspectives. But I remember my mom was like saying to me, look, I don't care what you study, just get a master's, like real South Asian parents there. Just get a master's. So that's what I did. So that's one of my earliest memories. My other early memory is being born and raised in Toronto. I remember that when we walked down the street, if you saw another South Asian family, you stopped to talk to them. Right? This was the days before Toronto was 25% South Asian. I mean, really, there was such a small community. And my parents, especially my father, he knew everybody, like everybody. And I remember growing up and being invited to and attending different religious ceremonies of the main, religious traditions of the area of South Asia. So we went to like Hindu weddings and Sikh weddings, and once someone's daughter got into university, and we went to a Sikh ceremony for that to congratulate, send her off with good luck.
We used to do that in those days.
Yeah.
Right? Nadia, it's like there was no kind of divisiveness the way it is today. Well, what is that? Is that because of population numbers?
I think that might be part of it. But, speaking of that, I remember like when I was a child, on the weekend, everybody went to Gerrard Street, right? You would see the same people every single weekend. those couple of blocks really were the entirety of the South Asian community. So part of it was that you just sort of interacted with each other a lot more. And I think that South Asians, we saw ourselves as having a singular experience. And now it's become more fragmented because on the one hand, I think, okay, there is something good about it where we can recognize the subtleties, right? We can recognize the complexities. But at the same time, you know, I'd like it, and I think the younger generation, my generation and younger, certainly, we are more willing to see commonalities as well. Yeah. And so these are some of my early experiences, walking down Gerrard Street, seeing the same people, going to the movies, eating chum chum and mithais, and just having parents who just were constantly encouraging and just taught me that I could have anything I was willing to work for. And that has really stayed with me.
Absolutely. So when was it that you decided that this was something you wanted to do, you know, as your job? I mean, who actually says that I want to be an astrologist?
No one.
Right. So talk to me.
No one.
Or at least it's like the auntie back home in India, right? And Pakistan, etc. It's never someone that is, you know, really brought up in the Western world so much within our community, right? So talk to me about where that came about for you. When did you know that, you know, this is my calling? Like, I don't know where it's going to take me, because that's what a calling is, right?
Yeah.
But I know that it's going to take me where I need to go.
Well, I think that I think that that feeling like, okay, this is what I'm doing and this is what I'm committed to, that came a lot later. When I was young, I remember that it wasn't like we had active astrologers in the family, but we had a lot of fans of astrologers and psychics and readers. And so my aunts on both sides of my family were always going and talking about, oh, I saw this famous astrologer and I saw that famous astrologer. I saw this reader. So that was a part of it. So I remember growing up and hearing a lot of stories about the people in my ancestry, like going hundreds and hundreds of years back, and even more recently as well. People who were mystics, Sufi mystics, people who were sort of interested in more experiential or experimental forms of spiritual connection and spiritual experience. Lots of people who were interested in various forms of esoteric arts. And there were a lot of stories of people like that. And so I felt a connection to that as well. I know that I was very intuitive as a child. It was when I was 14 years old that I sort of stumbled into a job at the CNE reading palms. And it was very much stumbling into it. And I was only 14 years old, but I remember doing that for 3 weeks and just constantly being told how good I was at reading hands. And so after the CNE was over, wherever I would go with my family, people would stick their hands in my face and be like, read my hand. And I was like, oh no, that's not gonna work. And it was around that time that my aunt started giving me astrology books and saying, you know, I think you're gonna be good at this. And what I really think is that they just wanted to not have to go out to see an astrologer to see someone. They just wanted someone in the family. And so that was like sort of the very beginning. But it was when I got older and I went through a period of time that was very, very difficult. And it was very painful for me as well. And up until that point, I didn't really have any direction. You know, I was trying out all kinds of different things, but I wasn't committed to anything. And I remember I was in university and I was in my about to start my second year of university. And up until that point, I thought that I was supposed to be Madonna. Like I had some image in my mind because I think that as a child growing up, that was my example of a powerful woman, right?
Especially in the 80s.
Yes, and the 90s, right?
The 90s.
When I really came of age. And so that was a woman who had a voice in the world. And so that is what I thought I needed to be. And I didn't realize what I was really going for at the time. I just felt like that was the example. That's what I'm supposed to be. And I had this moment where I realized the world already has a Madonna. It doesn't need another Madonna, but maybe it could use a Nadia Shah. I'm getting chills right now.
Amen, sister.
It was a very painful moment actually, because once I had that realization, I realized that I didn't know who I was. And
Was that the pain?
that was the pain. And I lived in that pain, this numbness for a year.
Wow.
And it was a dark night of the soul. Very, very painful. But it was during that time that astrology helped me so much.
100%.
Completely. It was astrology that gave me hope, and that I started to tap into it more and more. Thank you. But it was astrology that helped me to cultivate wisdom, to have faith that this would matter to somebody.
You have
Oh,
no
you got me
idea,
moving.
lady.
You're moving me.
Lady, you have no idea how many people you have moved in this world. I mean, look at French Vanity Fair has named you as the top 12 astrologers in the world. You are world renowned, and not because of fame, but because of your authenticity to serve.
Yeah.
And it's real and it's honest. And the things that you say, Nadia, I mean, I follow you, you know that, right? I'm a huge superstar fan. I am one of your superstars, girlfriend.
Thank you.
But what I love about, listening to you versus, many of the others that are out there who are also equally fabulous, but the magic I get from you, why you stir my soul, and I want you to know that pain that you had all those years ago was warranted. And this is why it was warranted, because when you serve on the camera and you give the knowledge to people and that wisdom and the things that you've learned that we, come to you for as the master, right? You really make a visceral difference. It's not just listening like you listen to, someone and, you're having a bit of fun and it's entertainment. For me, it's actually not entertainment, and I'm going to be very honest about it. And that's the magic, right? When I listen to you, I feel like an intelligent human being is telling me from a lot of knowledge in very simple terms what I need to know. That is not an easy thing to do.
Thank you.
It's interesting because there's this program I'm putting together right now, and a part of that is telling your story, right? And what I get people to do, and I have to tell you this, what I get people to do is I get them to write their story in 500 words, then I tell them to write it in 250, then I tell them to write it in a sentence, then I tell them to give me 3 words that need to encapsulate their story. The hardest thing to do is to tell your story in 3 words. It's much easier to do it when it's like a dissertation, right? You know this, you're an academic. Somehow you take all the things that you've learned, both in life, as a woman, as in culture, in society, in pop culture, and all the things that affect us from the outside, right? You take the knowledge and the wisdom that you've learned, right, in school, in academia. Somehow you put all that together in everyday layman terms. I don't know how you do it, sister. And that's the magic. That is you.
Thank you. Thank you. That means a lot to me, coming from you, of course, because I admire you so much.
Likewise.
But it's one of those things that I had an experience recently where someone said to me, "I'm so grateful for all the things that you've ever gone through to make you who you are." And that was hard to appreciate, but I can see now how there was some wisdom playing out all along. There really was. And so it was after I came out of that period of time that I realized, all I ever really wanted to do was give people hope.
Yeah.
Was to inspire people. Because I know how astrologers and astrology inspired me when I needed it. And
Yeah.
it wasn't just when I was transitioning from, being what I consider a person who was largely unconscious towards a person who was, willing to strip away what wasn't real. It wasn't just that, but throughout my life, at various moments in my life, it was astrology that reminded me, that returned me to something essential, to what really matters, and just gave me hope, allowed me to hang on another day and another day when that was so hard to do. And
Can I ask you something, Nadia? Can you define that daily pain? I'm asking you this because I'm fascinated by pain. I'm fascinated by my own pain, fascinated by the pain that I see in others, the people that I love, the people that I see from afar, right? Because it's the pain that helps us find who we need to be, right? I mean, It happened with Jesus with the 30 days, 30 nights. It happened with Job with the loss of everything, but really, did he lose anything? There's so many stories in history that talk about how pain helped people find who they needed to be. So that is your story. It's the story of humanity, right? What did that pain feel like?
Empty. It was really, you know, when I hear the phrase dark night of the soul, that is it. Yeah. To feel like you are not really there. I have a dear friend of mine, a spiritual mentor of mine, and she said to me, it was like for that period of time, I was looking at you, but you weren't really there. It was like just a shell walking around. And yeah, I lived it. I lived it for a long time. And I think that's really it. That it's just like feeling numb. Yeah. Because to feel was too painful.
Right.
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah. And
so when did that pain, when was your soul, your journey, your coming of age of Nadia Shah, did that pain translate into something positive?
yeah, so much positive. Wisdom for one, compassion for another, being able to see the pain in others, knowing that really there's no difference.
There's no difference.
You got me emotional, right? You got me in my feels, as they say, right? But really, I mean, I think that we hear that a lot. We hear that all the time. But if we were willing to see ourselves in others more, it would be it would be a world where we were able to acknowledge the love a lot more.
Right.
It would be a world where we were willing to acknowledge the wisdom a lot more, because the love and wisdom is there. You know, as I like to say, the universe is wise and loving. I don't mean it's easy. I don't mean it's always going to be, you know, a breeze. I don't mean lie to yourself and tell you you're not feeling what you feel. I don't mean think positive thoughts and that's it. What I mean is that any moment can be used to move you towards becoming more loving and more wise. And what I also mean, and I will share this with you, to me really, so when I was a graduate student, I wrote my dissertation on Ibn Arabi. And there was a whole process to that, right? Like when I was growing up, I remember asking my mom, I said to her, how do we know which religion is right? And she said, we don't know. And so all you can do is be a good person. And if you're a good person and you're a loving person, you're a part of every religion. And that is really how I was raised. I was raised to stay open and to recognize how the sacred is acknowledged in so many different ways. And, you know, like I said, we went to ceremonies and temples and mosques and churches. That was so much a part of my experience growing up. And
That's
I
so
have
rare,
continued.
though, Nadia. Like, you know how rare that is in the South Asian community, and even more rare when it comes to, you know, religions that people, you know, perceive in, you know, popular culture to be the opposite of that. Come on.
Well, look, do you think that maybe it was the generation? Because you think about that generation, right? They were the generation born in the late 40s. They arose from a place of and being raised by people who survived religious violence. My great uncle, who was the first person to immigrate to Canada in the early 60s.
Really?
In the early 60s. My family has been here since the early 60s. And he said that he was part of, my family originates from a town in India called Batala. Like, that's where I know my ancestors come from. I'd love to go, but for whatever reason, the universe, like every time I try to go, every time something comes up that says, nope, not right now. Like practically, you know, and it's been quite remarkable. I've been trying to go for like a good 20 years now, but that's okay. It is what it is. And I know I'll be there when I'm supposed to. But, you know, he talked about, and he told me about, there was a train ride that he had to take from Batala and towards crossing the border into Pakistan. And this was a time when the World War II had just ended. There was a lot of fear at the time that the same thing that happened to Jewish people during the Holocaust could happen in other parts of the world. And so that was part of the fear that drove people to say, okay, I'm taking the train, I'm going. And my great uncle told me that he saw people who'd been neighbors all their lives for generations and generations. He saw people who'd grown up together and been friends turn around and kill each other
Oh my gosh.
turn around and be violent, and the ways in which people treated each other in the name of religion, in the name of God. He said it could make you think that there is no God. So you think about a generation who's come up after that collective trauma, right? I think that we have right now in the world this energy spreading where you have people going towards these extreme identities, right? And saying, no, this is my religion and this is my country and this is who I am. But that is because they are of a different generation.
Right.
The generation of my parents, the generation of my great uncle, of my grandparents, they saw how dangerous that was. They saw what could happen. And so they moved in a different direction. And so, you say that that's so unusual, but I have seen that quite a bit, actually. And I think about the South Asians that I grew up with. Like I said, it wasn't just me going to a Hindu temple or a Gurdwara or all this stuff. It was actually like they came to our celebrations,
Right.
It was our Hindu friends coming to Muslim weddings. It was people of many different religions going to a wedding in a Christian church. It was very, very normal. When I was singing Christmas carols, I wasn't the only South Asian kid singing Christmas carols.
Yeah.
There were kids of all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of religions who are participating because why not?
Absolutely.
Why not? It's all for us, right?
Yeah.
And I think that the generation that came here in the 60s, in the 70s, it was a different generation. They were people who were most often highly educated. They were coming to assimilate. They were coming with open hearts. They were coming filled with possibilities. I mean, you think about it, in the 90s, Pakistan had a female prime minister
Absolutely.
who was very progressive. I don't know anything about the politics or whatever. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the symbolism, the icon, this woman who came from a very progressive lineage, being a progressive figure, an icon for what she represented. It was that generation of my great uncle, of my grandparents, of my parents who made that possible.
Right.
And so this is why my parents and the other people I saw in my generation say women are equal, right? People of any background are equal.
So Nadia, how impactful do you feel our ancestry is? Because I've heard you talk about this quite often, and it's never really been something that I've looked into personally, that maybe some of the pains, maybe some of the karma, that
The trauma.
and the trauma from generations is actually impacting a part of my life. Like I've never known or even looked at that until I started to listen to some of these things that you would talk about in relation to that. So my question for you is, how impactful is that on our generation, and then how impactful would that then be on my children's generation, and so on and so forth?
Well, I see that in a few different ways. So one way that I see that is that we are older souls than ever before. And I think that we see this in
Do we keep messing up that we're not able to ascend?
Well, no, here's the thing, right? What does it mean to ascend? It means that you've learned everything there is to learn in this realm, in this earth school, as Gary Zukav calls it. And so if our essential nature is love, and I have a lot to say about that because that is something I have, been deeply moved by. It is the intention behind everything I do. But if that is the case, if we are an expression of divine love, and we are learning to embody that more and more fully over the course of this life, which I believe we are, then if we had already embodied that fully, why would we be here? We have no reason to be here in the earth school on this plane. We would ascend, we would evolve to the next level. But we're all learning, we are all growing. That's why, like for me, on my social media, you see me being very human,
yes.
Right? I am not gonna, sit on a stone and a sage or whatever. No way. I am very human. And it actually makes me kind of uncomfortable when people try to project something onto me like, oh, you're so gifted or you're so whatever, because I think that is a way we separate ourselves from each other. I know a skill, okay? And I had great opportunity in my life. I was born and raised in Canada. I had amazing teachers. I had the opportunity at a great education. I have met a lot of people in my travels who should have had the opportunities I did, but they just didn't.
To encapsulate the thought process about ancestry and how it affects us. How should we look at that from your perspective?
So from my perspective, because we are older souls than ever, I think that we are packing in several lifetimes into one. And a part of what we may do as part of one of the phases we'll go through in our life is we may have to look at that. We may have to look at our ancestry and to say, what is it going to mean to me today? Because ultimately, if we are here to evolve, which I believe we are, if we are here to embody love and wisdom, as I like to call it, divine energy, you could call it God, you could call it, if we're here to do that, it's a journey. And a part of that means learning from the past. And I feel like what I do is like continuing the legacy of my ancestors, but in my own 21st century modern Western woman way, because I am going to honor who I am, right? I'm going to honor that I was born here in this time, in this space for a reason. I don't need to be in any other, space in order to honor that. I can bring it forward. And I do think that when we are willing to see the past with love, with all its pain, with its generational pain, with its generational trauma, if we are willing, just the willingness to be willing to see it with love, that allows our entire ancestors to dance in the present with us and through us.
Boy, that's a big one.
Yeah, it can be.
But just you saying that just makes me want that.
Well, you are doing that. What are you talking about? You are living it. Oh my goodness. You radiate it. You shine it. I think it is completely without any doubt that you are bringing forward an energy that is not just about whatever was happening last year, whatever was happening last month. It is a connection to something bigger, something divine. That is legacy. That is ancestry. We're not here to repeat the patterns. We're not here to live the lives of previous generations or previous people. And I think that is where sometimes in the South Asian community, we find ourselves sort of in this space of guilt. Yes. It can take us a little longer to find ourselves because we are told that we need to be what it is that our parents tell us we need to be, right? And it is hard to move on from that. It was painful for my father in particular, who was a politician as well. It was painful for him when he saw that I did not want to be Prime Minister of Canada, right? He had this vision for my life that I was going to go to law school, I was going to, pursue a certain path, and that was painful for him. But I knew that that is what I needed to do. And I also knew that he raised me to be a strong, independent, free-thinking person. And this is how it was going to come forward. And so to be willing to honor that, our parents and the legacy that we carry, there's love there. But ultimately, they are human, right? And we have to be willing to follow our own path. I think that sense of moving between that can be part of the difficulty. But once you cross that bridge, once you figure out your own voice, it is addictive. It really is, because then you know that you're really honoring the ancestors. You're really honoring the love of your family, of your parents, when you are willing to completely be yourself and to move forward in that instead of being an image or an illusion. Right? When you move into truth, that is how we honor our legacy that much more.